Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to my talk. It should always, it should come with a health warning, my talks, because I've been known to jump out into quite expansive ideas that sort of spread out into hyperspace and other areas. I'm not doing the universal physics talk today though, so I'll try and be kind. Yeah, my thinking's always, I try to get quite excited about ideas and theories, and as you'll see as I go along, I'm always thinking of new ones and coming up with ideas that excite me as much as hopefully they will you as well. This first slide is London, believe it or not. People think of London as a big city, perhaps you've been there as a tourist, lots of theatres and the West End and busyness and cars. But this is the other side of London, South London, where I'm living at the minute. This is two things back to common. It's a nice place to walk and do introverted intuition and come up with ideas. So my talk, yes, it's about personality parts, which is the model, the name I've given to the model of where my thinking's at right now, and it's quite early days for this model, but I'm going to be developing it probably over the next 40 years or so, and we'll see where it gets to. And Depth Typology is sort of one name for John Beebe's model that has been given to it over the last year or so, and it's what I've been passionate about for about the last 5 years, and I know he's been developing his work for a lot longer than that, but Bob McAlpin, who's here at this conference, he's the man who introduced me to it, and as you just said before, it's changed my life as well, which is why I've dedicated myself to really following this way of thinking and exploring it. So I'm trying to develop this theory in different ways as well. I'm very fortunate to have John as a mentor as well, so I've managed to develop a relationship ongoing, which is great, because having some the ability to get feedback off the man himself in this area is priceless stuff. So INTJ is my type preferences. You'll probably become more and more aware as this talk goes on. So I'm Richard Owen. I actually invented the word dinosaur. I also wrote a lot about archetypes, especially biological archetypes. I had a bit of argument with Charles Darwin, one of my contemporaries. And so my idea of biological archetypes kind of had a bit of conflict with his theory of evolution. And I also founded the National History Museum in London as well. Actually, it's obviously not me, but if you were to Google my name, you might come up with this guy. This is the most famous Richard Owen ever. This is me, Richard Owen INTJ. I am a trustee of the BAPT. Some people call it BAPT, but I think BAPT is the sort of sound that you hear when a disorientated pigeon flies into a patio window. So I don't like to call it that, I call it BAPT. And I'm a trade trustee, it's a charity organisation, I'm the current treasurer, so I'm doing all of the numbers and the boring stuff, paying my dues. So I've also got an MSc in organisational psychology. I completed that a few years ago in England, up there in Newcastle, which is where I'm from originally, in the northeast of England. A bit colder than it is down this area of the world. I'm also obviously MBTI certified steps 1 and 2. I came across and did it here in the United States, in Cincinnati. So that was with CPP. And obviously, like I say, I'm studying John's model. John's sort of a supervisor, mentor for me, and his model is very special, I believe, and something that I'm dedicating a lot of my thought time to. GoMyRead.com is one of my websites, and it's the course that I run in London. Similarly to how I learned about John's model through Bob McAlpin's talks, I have developed my own course in London that really takes people through a journey of applying the model and exploring it from a subjective point of view to themselves and to their relationships. So I really believe that's the only way you can really get the model, through living it, through exploring your actual life in context. It's not the sort of model you can know theoretically or apply to other people before you've really been through this sort of process. So, I strongly recommend, if you really want to get your head around it, find a way to do that, an immersive experience over time that allows you the space to notice some of these subtle aspects of yourself that are not always obvious. So who's here in the room? I've got a quick survey. Put your hands up. You be more than one category. Are you a psychologist? Do you call yourself a psychologist? Put your hand up quickly. This is a very quick poll. Anyone a psychologist? No. Okay. Interesting. Anyone a counsellor or psychotherapist? Okay, we've got a few of those guys. We've got anyone HR practitioner? One. Any other type practitioner? A few. What kind of type practitioner?
We call ourselves OD, Organization Development Practitioners.
Okay.
Typically, instead of in the HR.
Okay, it's just a cultural thing, right? Yeah. So OD is kind of drugs thing. Alcohol. Never mind. Okay, it's not a good time to use drugs. So type fanatic. Any one of those here?
Sure.
Yeah, we've got type fanatic. We can all call ourselves one of those. Who's familiar with John Beebe's model? Quite a lot of people. So that's good, but a few people aren't necessarily. So I'm going to try and give a quick overview of John's model. Some people I've talked to at this conference have said they don't necessarily get it, or even sometimes believe in this model. Right. And I think some people get put off by the abstraction of it sometimes. I can send you the slides after, by the way, if you want. So there's no need to do photos. You won't really want to read it anyway. So this is a map in a sort of stack version of the model, which represents my particular type and how it's laid out within John's structure. So I'm an INTJ by preference. Introverted intuition is there at the top of the stack. Then extroverted thinking, there's nothing strange about that. That's all standard stuff in Myers-Briggs, right? It's defined the types are defined in Myers-Briggs by the dominant and the auxiliary. That's how we work it out. Sorry, I keep doing that. The next one, introverted feeling. So those who were in the talk before, this is how John sees the third function being as the same attitude as the dominant. And then we've got the inferior, and then the bottom four. So it carries all eight of these function attitudes. And these function attitudes, really, this is what Jung wrote about in Psychological Types. For Jung, these 8 function attitudes were the types. They were his types. He had 8 types in his model. And the reason being, I think, is because Jung was a psychiatrist. He worked in a psychiatric institution. He was working with people who were not your standard norm curve, centre of the norm curve people of the population. He was working with people who have severe mental health issues and trauma, psychosis, neurotic issues, hysteria, all kinds of things. But he was recognising people who were in the grip, who were pretty much expressing only one of these function attitudes most of the time. It was pathological. So it was quite easy for him to spot it in that sort of population of people. But in the sort of more standard population of people who, like ourselves, who are not in a psychiatric institute, unless you're on day release, welcome, and that's
I have to be back to this.
Quick. So, we pretty much display all of these 8 function attitudes in our use of our minds during everyday life. Now, the important thing that John's added to the system is that he's got what he calls an archetype for each of the positions. And the archetypes are static for each of the positions in the model. What changes is between the types is the order of the functions, right? We get that. The functions, they tend to, for me, I've got introverted intuition, extrovert thinking, and from there, due to a rule of dynamics and balance, the rest is predictable. Once you know the first 2, you can write out the rest from just following some simple rules, which I'm not going to go into. But the point is, the order changes for each time. It's got a different order. But the archetypes for each position stay the same. And the archetypes, I'm going to go into more in a minute, but are really just about how you express the function, how that function comes out, what sort of quality of a character and expression it has. So the archetypes, we've got the hero, the good parent, the eternal child, or puer, puella, as it's called in Latin. The animus is the other gendered version. The opposing personality, the critical parent, or senex, or witch in the opposite gender. The trickster, and then the demon daimon in the bottom position. And John's written about this stuff over the last 30 years. He's been validating this model through his practice as a Jungian analyst. But his book came out last year, Energies and Patterns in Psychological Types, where he gives the sort of most comprehensive overview, bringing all together his thoughts, including newer thoughts as well. And then Mark Hunziker wrote his book shortly, he released his book shortly afterwards, where he actually gave this system the name Depth Typology. And I think that for me is the neatest way to describe it, because before that was called the Beebe model, the 8-functioning archetype model, various other things. So I think Depth Typology really describes what it is. It brings a sense of depth psychology to time. And one of the other distinctions in the model is that you've got the two halves really here. That the top four archetypes and the functions that they carry are generally described as the ego syntonic. That's just a fancy word, and I think for me that means they've got a certain positive, constructive kind of nature to them. I've written an article about this. It's coming out in Typeface magazine, which you'll read more about my thoughts on this. But the opposite is the ego dystonic, also what's called the shadow, and I think they've got a negative or destructive kind of quality. The functions that we use in those positions, I think you could almost think in motivational terms like carrot and stick. You know, the carrot is the things we move towards. It's like the ego syntonic. The stick is the things that we move away from. We're motivated by a sort of negative, away from type of motivation. That's I think how the shadow, certainly I've experienced it. That's just a quick way of looking at that. Those otherwise slightly confusing words. But that's the basis of the model. You know, you can just work out what your functions are, and then the idea is that you go out into everyday life and try and recognise, well, how am I expressing, say, introverted feeling with the eternal child, puer type quality? You know, that's the stuff that I take people through 7 half-day workshops, trying to get a real handle on. It's not quick stuff, which is why I'm not going to try and attempt to do it today. But do take the time to do it, because it is life-changing stuff. You won't believe when you start recognising these things you've been doing all the time, right under your nose, and you're like, that's what it is. And suddenly it has a name, and that's what it is, and now I know it's there, and it's predictable, and it's not just me going mad. It's just, I'm a human being, this is the human condition, and this model is a great way to explain it. Yeah?
Richard, would you mind giving us an example of what does introverted feeling look like for you as an INTJ?
I'm going to go on to that in a second. I will do that, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk about archetypes first in general. So, again, it's a word that can put people off. It seems a bit kind of mystical. What are these archetype things? I can't kind of get my hands on them. They're kind of a bit abstract. The word archetype, great to think about it as having two roots, two parts to it. The word archaic and the word typical. You know, so the two roots here, we've got archaic. That part of it means it's something that's found across all time. And so whenever you look at human beings, I'm just getting used to this, by the way, it's a new clicker, too sensitive. So when we look at human nature across time as far back as we can go, we'll always find examples of these qualities and characteristic human behaviours that get written in folklore, myths, legends, media, films, books, everything that the human race can conceive of that describes human behaviour. You'll see these patterns reoccurring across all time. They're typical, they're found everywhere, no matter what culture, what part of the world you go to. You'll find that there's examples of stories and so on that describe these things. And if you watch people and get to know them anywhere in the world, you'll find that these qualities exist. That's the point. That's what archetypal means. It's everywhere, and it's all throughout all time. Essentially, it's part of our inherited, shared psychological architecture. That's my phrase for it. You can think about it in evolutionary terms. It's like in our DNA. We've evolved as human beings to have a shared architecture for the mind, in which these certain patterns of expression and behaviour, these ways of being, are built into all of us. And that's what I love about thinking about the model this way. It's like, rather than being types and we're all different, no, we're all the same. And this is how we're the same, because we've all got a shared architecture of the mind. But this architecture is in an abstract schematic form. Think about like an architect's blueprints, but in a very rough form. So you know that the house is going to have a roof and a door and a window, but you don't quite know exactly what it's going to look like. You just know what general form it's going to have. That's like what an archetype's like. It just gives you a general blueprint or template for this kind of behaviour. So in the sense of being like a parental type of archetype, you can think of like in an abstract way, being parent-like is a certain sort of power dynamic with relation to another person or another part of yourself. And that's the archetypal aspect. There's a certain parent-likeness, which is a certain way of interacting, which has this kind of general quality. That's the level on which the archetype sits. So within depth typology, a nice way to see it is the function is what we do. The archetype is the way that we do it. And I'm into swing music, and I love that song. Saying what you do is the way that you do it. Listen to it. It's all about this. It's all about this model thing. You. So there, dead simple. Function is what we do. Archetype is the way that we do it. Of course, in a larger sense, archetype is any aspect of the mind or psyche that is inherently shared by all human beings. But in this model, it has a specific meaning. It's the way that we do it. It's the characteristic behaviour. This is another set of words that really give you a sense of what that is. It's the archetype is like a role which the function takes on. It's a character with which it expresses. It can be an emotional tone. It can be when we're using that function, or when someone else is using that function that calls us the same one up in us, we can experience the archetype as an emotional quality to it as well. A flavour is another way of looking at it, or just quality of expression. Yeah? Does that make sense to you guys who are not familiar with the model, with what an archetype is in this context?
That's a great way to explain it.
Right? It's nothing mystical, it's really simple, and that's what I'm trying to get across. But when we see archetypes portrayed, often it's in this sort of form as like characters. This is like similar to like the Harlequin. I think it's actually the Costanello, the Italian version, but nevertheless, it's a trickster character in European culture that's depicted. But when we see archetypes, it's often best understood through some projected character that we can link into to understand what it means. This is another way John's model is drawn out, and he also describes the archetypes as archetypal complexes. And the word complex, if the archetypal part of it is just the schematic blueprint, the general nature of what it is, the complex part of it is where that meets real experience. So if you've got a parent part of yourself, an archetype that is parent-like, then you actually meet your real parents in real life. That's where the complex part comes in. The real experience of the real actual parents meets the archetypal nature of the parent, and it sort of clothes the archetype. That's the way that he describes it. So it's an archetypal complex in the sense that for us it's kind of personal as well. It has an aspect of archetype and a real experience, which shapes how it is for us. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. So John often he writes this model out like this. Rather than a horizontal stack, he draws it like this, as two crosses. And the crosses give a real sense of how the dynamics are, how the opposition is between the function attitudes. Because they are complementary in nature, they are opposing, they are in the sense that when we're focused on one in our attention, the other ones get suppressed to some degree when we've got a preference for one or the other. So this is a nice way. He describes the up and down axis here as the spine of the personality. The dominant function and the inferior function at this end. This is mine again, introvert, intuition, extrovert, sensitive. The spine of the personality, he says that's like our core sense of identity, how we relate to ourselves. The spine. And the arms going across, like he says that's how we relate to others. It's the axis of relation to others. Again, it's a really nice, simple way to break this model down a bit into two different ways to see how we relate. And I think it's a great way to depict the model because it gives the sense of dynamics of opposition, whereas the horizontal stack doesn't. And the horizontal stack also confuses people because then they get the sense that, the ones at the top are the most conscious or the most developed. And Beebe is very clear about that he doesn't think about it like that anymore. He thinks about that each position is qualitative. Has a different way of being, but it's not any sort of map that
It
says...
becomes about relations and not work.
Yeah, it's not to do with...
Without judging it.
Yeah, it's not to do with the developmental conscious hierarchy. You know, hierarchy is the word people use. It's more a qualitative hierarchy than a quantitative one, so to speak. Yeah. So then the shadows are saying, you know, you've got the opposition between the two. Those who are really perceptive will notice they've actually flipped around the arms, because for me, reading left to right in terms of the dominance makes more sense. Beebe actually draws the auxiliary function on this side, but just a small change. So this is the next one. I'm going to give you an example. Would anyone, you guys can think about this as well while I'm talking, would anyone who's explored their own type of Beebe's model, I know Stephen Weed has it a lot, like, you know, give a quick, brief example of one of their archetypes that they've discovered acting in real life. To give you an example, as I was asked about my puer function, it's been a large part of my life actually. I was kind of an eternal child. You know, in fiction, Peter Pan is a good example of a puer, an eternal child.
Could you just flip back to the other slide?
Yeah. I'm going to send you these later though.
Cool. Just as you were talking.
Yeah, okay, cool, okay. So for me, yeah, this is my tertiary function, which is associated, carried by the archetypal quality, role, character of the puer, the eternal child. What's that like? Well, it didn't really come out in me till I was about 20 years old. Before that, I was very much more logical, much more thinking, I would make sensible decisions in life. And then I suddenly started to question all that. I had a deep sense, I had a gut feeling that I didn't really enjoy what I was doing a chemistry degree. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I had a guilty feeling that I wanted to be a musician. It took me quite a while to really accept the value of this, my own personal subjective value, actually, that music was something worthwhile, that had value to it for me, and chemistry didn't. And I had to really question my values. It was a big change. It was kind of, I call it like an early midlife crisis. It was, you know, it really was a sort of, what am I doing in my life? What on earth am I going to do? And it, gradually I had to, my puer was quite insistent though. You know, it had this is what, the way it comes out, you can often recognize in tone of voice, in mannerisms and expressiveness. And for me, like if you see me getting gripped by my puer, it's like watching a child having a tantrum, okay? It becomes really over pedantic and like, it's not fair because it isn't, and it's like, this is the way it is, and it's not right, you know? Because actually, the puer, in my case, is actually introvert feeling, so it's looking at ethics, morals, what's universally right and wrong in the world. So, you know, when I see people doing things that are bad for the environment, or just ethically wrong, they're manipulating people and that kind of thing, it's like, you know, it's wrong, and my puer wants to stand up against it, go on a little crusade, but it's doing it in it's like, you can't do that because it's wrong, because you shouldn't be doing that. It's really thinking this kind of, you know, I feel like that, and it comes out, people would say I went on rants, okay, when I was younger, because it would be coming out like that. Does that make sense?
I never do that.
Never do. We never do rants. We don't do rants. Nope. We don't do rants. Does that give me an idea? Anyone else? Sorry, so you first there, sorry.
Just to kind of help gel this in my mind,
Yeah.
having attended the pre-conference workshop on the coaching, multi-model coaching certificate, we covered a little bit of this.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, I had an experience yesterday in Linda Barron's session where it was quite deep for an NT personality like me. There were quite a lot of inroads that could be taken into understanding and dealing with the content and processing it. And while I was doing that, I got very involved in communicating. So I was asking her questions, I was asking him questions, the co-presenter questions, and I was stating my own experiences. And as I did that, I saw my complete extroverted feeling blind spot there in that trickster function coming to haunt me, because I was aware of the fact that I was alienating the NFs that were sitting with me on the table, which I confirmed with them later.
Yeah.
And I was also creating a certain discord within the group, or helping nurture a sort of discord within the group as I challenged ideas in order to learn. Mm-hmm. And all night, that's all I could think about. I was embarrassed all the way on my drive home. And when I woke up late at night and I couldn't sleep, that's what I was thinking about. So I guess I was applying a trick on me by doing that. I don't know where the trickster word comes in, but that's how it was working for me.
Yeah, it can feel tricky. Yeah, you get that sense of you'd really like to create social harmony, but whatever you try to do to create it, it seems to backfire, and then suddenly people are upset with you again. It's like a no-win situation, And then it happens obviously under the radar a lot of time. It's unconscious. You're giving off signals that you're not even aware of. It's a shocking thing for an INTJ. Stephen, you were going to give us.
Yeah, I'm just going to underscore your comments with your story around the puer. My puer comes out uncontrollably. Mine is an introverted thinking, and when INTPs in my life, where the introverted thinking is dominant, or ENTP, where the introverted thinking is in the parent position, nothing sets my child up to be told what is right and what is wrong. This is the way to think about it. And this is right, and that's whatever you're thinking. And I stamp my feet, and it's just a little child tantrum, almost uncontrollable.
About boundaries, right? Because with introverted thinking, people define boundaries.
And it's about the way that I define something, the way that I'm thinking about it, and that framework. Being told that I'm just wrong. And I would just stamp my feet and have a tantrum.
Fantastic. What were you going to say?
Well, I like to share a positive puer experience.
Fantastic.
And I only know it now because I've done it on Beebe's workshops and taught
great.
this. My first career was as a technical writer with a software company. I have ENFP preferences, extroverted thinking in the child. I don't know about you, but the childlike and extroverted thinking don't naturally go together for me, so I was very puzzled. And Beebe helped me see what it was. I was in a software environment. They don't like to talk to people. They don't like to write things down. I was dragging things out of them. Every day was solving a puzzle, trying to drag information out of them and then make it make sense and make it logical and write a good book. So I was using my child function to solve puzzles all day long. And I loved that career for years. But it took me forever to figure out how extroverted thinking shows up positively as a child. Because it was joyful for me to solve those puzzles every day.
This is a really good point, is that the puer has this excitement and energy for life, lust for life. When you find your puer and get into something, that's what drove me to working in music. Because I was so passionate, and I'm like, you're right, that love. So one more,
What you said approximately, you're the MTP, right?
INFJ.
What approximately that I've learned over so many years, in my 82nd year now, is an INTP, hardcore one, but pretty well differentiated, is to be told, Marcus, as a scientist and an engineer, as I've been a psychologist, you're dead wrong about it. That really stimulates me intellectually. I don't really feel much of anything, but it just stimulates me intellectually. Let's talk about it, tell me why. However, where my vulnerability is my introverted feeling, my demon. And if somebody likes to listen to it, now that hurts deeply. It hurts my feelings. It's like my introverted feeling down there is like a lightning rod. It gets hit. And I feel something, but to be told I'm full of shit, I'm wrong, and all that's it. That stimulates me intellectually. So that's characteristic, I think, of an INTP.
So
my introverted feeling is my demon way down, and that really, the worst someone can do is just slam the door in my face. That is taken personally, and that hurts.
It's really interesting. So you have the demonic in the shadow. For you, that's kind of shutting you down. The demonic place is like it invalidates us. It makes us. It makes us feel worthless when it's like it pulls the rug out from underneath us sometimes.
Yeah, but to be disagreed with is fun.
Yeah. Okay.
It's stimulating.
Yeah. And you're saying that.
I might learn something,
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming if you find the person who's critiqued you to be highly confident, that's where the excitement comes, right? Like you thought about something for a long time, and the person who's critiqued you believe to be highly confident, that would get you more excited than if you thought the argument was kind of like a mediocre argument. But an excellent argument against your thinking, you get really fired up.
I would, I think it's moreover, I do value confidence, and I feel when I experience or deal with incompetence or pretended competence, incompetence, it puts you such shadow. It really activates my introverted intuition and critical pattern.
So what?
I keep it under control.
Same for me.
Well, for what it's worth, the other people, the three of us would identify with INTP.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is, that before we get too deep into this, and you know how deep it can go with this stuff, so, you know, my idea obviously, and the intention was never to try and capture all of this like depth within the short session, but just to give a quick flavour, especially for those who are newer to this model, kind of how people have discovered and start to recognise these parts of themselves in everyday life coming out, because it's not always obvious. It's kind of it takes quite a lot of awareness and watching for this sort of stuff. So my next question was like, you know, given the ideas of depth typology, what, you know, having studied psychology, what other theories can help us understand depth typology? I'm starting to think about it like INTJs do from different angles. I'm trying to see all the perspectives on it from wherever I can come from, and sort of not just taking it as the base set from which I'm seeing everything else from. You see, I'm trying to put it into a context. How can we connect it with everyday experience? That's my other question as well. And John's got a lot of other theories and ideas that go along with what I've showed you so far that really help to put it into perspective. Also, can we integrate type with other areas of psychology? That said, that's where I think we need to go. We need to be integrating with psychology as a whole and not being left out using Jung's language from 100 years ago and concepts that actually have no relevance within the language of modern day psychology. So let's have a look at a few areas. We're going to look at 4 different areas. We're going to look at mind, consciousness, self, and multiplicity. 4 areas that I've been reading about over the last year or so. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the different areas and how they can tie into what we're looking at. This is really crucial to everybody who's a psychologist or not. Everyone who's here at least is interested in psychology and discovering it. You know, so we need to know about this. Dan Siegel, this like a hero of mine, he crosses many disciplines, which is why he's great, because he's like a therapist and he's a neuroscientist and he's a psychologist. You know, he's got lots of things. He's got fingers in lots of different pies, and he's created his own model, massively wide-ranging model, interpersonal neurobiology, which ties together a lot of these fields. Him and his colleagues did a survey of over 100,000 mental health professionals globally, and they found that 95% had never been given a lecture on what the mind is. Pretty crazy considering that they're working with the mind. You know, think about it. Oh my God, it's like interviewing 100,000 car mechanics and they didn't know what a car was. Mind-boggling, to say the least. Okay. Now, you know, the essence of how he defines it is the mind is a process. This is where we get a bit esoteric here. It's a verb, not a noun. The verb is the mind is something that we do. It's something that happens. It's not a thing that we can get our hands on. Okay. Obviously, it relates to. Obviously, we know it relates to the brain, right? Yeah, but it's not the brain. It's kind of correlates with the brain. We know that the mind and the brain have a relationship very closely, but it's not one or the other. And actually, one can't be reduced to the other. This is what's called the hard problem of consciousness that's been talked about in philosophy. You can't reduce. They try to say, well, how can the brain produce consciousness and the experience that we have? And they've realised, you can't. Actually, the mind and the brain are just two, as Siegel would say, the primes. They can't be reduced from one to the other. It was in Jung's day, he didn't even use the word mind. He would have said psyche, you know, to explain this whole realm of the intangible processes that are going on. Siegel's description, more deeply here, gives talking about the mind. He says it's an emergent, self-organizing, dynamic process. So it's something that has its own plan. It's emerging with its own self-organization. It doesn't need anything else to tell it what to do. The mind has its own way of growing and developing. It just gets on with it. It's a dynamic process. It's always changing. It's embodied and relational. He's saying you can't separate the mind from the body and the brain and the entire body, not just the brain in the skull, the entire nervous system. the hormone system, the immune system, everything. It's all linked together.
It's interesting to think of that as someone in the last, he's not in here, but in the last session mentioned conservation. And that inability to detach a piece of the whole is exactly what this makes me think of. It's always making it a fixed sum equation.
Yeah. So it's not, it's not
Like conservation of matter and energy. Can't be created, can't be destroyed. We can move it around, but it's all there, all the time.
Okay, that's a nice way of looking at it. So, in the sense of it being relational as well, he's saying you can't separate the mind from relationships and interactions, not just external relationships, but internal ones between processes within the mind. It's all part of the package. You can't separate mind from relationship. And he describes it as the flow of energy and information across time. So we're talking about something pretty intangible here with the mind, right? Talking about intangible processes that are self-growing and emerging and organizing and also always innately embodied and relational. They give rise to our subjective experience and mental activities. They've really tried to find the mind here. It's quite a hard thing to do. Also, within this flow of energy and information, like I said, mind and brain are both irreducible primes. You can't say that mind arises from brain or that brain is created by mind. They both exist. It's like the dual nature of reality. If you're into quantum mechanics at all, you'll know that the nature of reality is matter, is particle and matter. At the same time, it is both. Everything is energy, everything is matter. They're interchangeable, but they're separate things. Where are we next? So consciousness. So again, this relates into this idea of intangible processes of mind. Consciousness is almost like a sort of forerunner of the word mind. Jung talks about consciousness. William James talks about consciousness. Early psychologists talked about consciousness. And the study of consciousness was central to psychology. And you can think consciousness as the actual, more like the subjective experience of these intangible processes of mind. The subjective experience of being aware, of being a mind. That is consciousness. It's like being the processes, which we know. We all know what it's like to be a physical body. We all know what it's like to be an intangible set of processes at the same time, aren't we also? It's really good. I think of consciousness as engagement or interaction. If a process is consciousness, it needs to be capable of engaging with another process or with something in the world out there or with something inside. That for me, that's definitional. That consciousness, by its nature, engages other processes and it interacts. So this early psychology was looking at the study of consciousness, and then behaviorism took over. So for the first half of the 20th century, it all went more and more in a direction towards behaviorism, third-person perspective, looking at what we can see externally, an empirical view from the external observational objective eye of science that they draw on the diagram, the eye. And it's important to realize that philosophers are trying to question this as well. Like Max Bellman's great philosopher on consciousness, he said that first person and third person perspectives are, Steve, I'm just not very good at this. I need some training. First and third person perspectives are complementary and mutually irreducible. A complete psychology requires both. I think that's kind of where we're getting more towards now. It's, people are sort of realizing that this sort of the behavioral approach isn't going to work for everything. It's not the full picture. And I think we're going back to a more whole sort of psychology that's taking on board both perspectives.
I love that you said whole too, because I'm pandering because I know he's a sinologue too, but it's amusing how we're discovering this in the West as if it's new.
Yeah.
And the East is kind of like, welcome to the party.
Yeah. But even in the West, we had a little sort of dip for a while. We were kind of out of the picture for a while, and then we're kind of back now. But actually, with a renewed, with an increased ability to be empirical as well at the same time, which is kind of going to be useful because it's still important. It requires both. So we look at attention. I mean, attention was mentioned in the workshop talk before this as well. You can think of attention as the focus of consciousness, of the processes of the mind. Okay, we've got these intangible processes going on. They engage with things. But which aspects of the processes are engaging, and what are they engaging with? That's what attention is kind of there to decide. But when you look at when you read about psychology, and cognitive psychology has got a lot to say about attention. And there's broadly two major types of attention that seem to come out again and again in different bits of different authors' work. You've got this type of attention, which is, by various words, orienting, bottom up, doesn't mean drinking, exogenous, covert. This is the sort of attention which guides itself, right? It's the attention that you don't willfully control. It's the attention that just goes where it wants to. And then we've got this sort of attention that is executive, top-down, endogenous, or overt. It's the sort of attention which we do at least feel that we have some sort of willful control over. We sort of, I can say, look at that cup over there, and you can go, okay, deliberately I'm going to focus my attention on that cup over there, and that's great. You know, you can experience our orienting bottom-up type of attention if we just focus on nothing in particular for a while, and then the mind just goes somewhere. It wanders, does what it wants to do. But my theory in this is like we spend a lot more time on autopilot, which is like the first type of attention, than we realise. We all think we're sort of conscious, aware beings, like deliberately steering our minds, but I don't think we are necessarily. You know, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that we spend a lot more time than we realise in this mind running itself on autopilot process. Actually, the third talk before this was heavily supportive of that kind of thing. So,
Richard?
Yeah.
Do you find any correlation between the orienting, attention, and perceiving functions and the
I'd say,
executing and
interesting, yeah, really good question. So, yes, I think there's a link there, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that certainly people who've got perceiving preference, I think from my experience their mind needs to be a bit more free. It needs to be let off the reins and allowed to do what it will a bit more. Whereas people with a judging preference are more in this mode a lot more. They're trying to deliberately steer their attention more. And this is what causes the biggest problem in schools for perceiving types. The fact that schools going, stop getting distracted, pay attention, stop it, pay attention, stop it, pay attention. And then their mind's not actually able to do what it's trying to do, and then it explodes.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Does that imply then that they are? I think a lot in terms of our role or the template in which we each are kind of fitting. And in the previous session, I asked this question too of because there were no real signs that we orient toward our like an introverted intuitive would become an extroverted sensor at the end of their life.
Yeah,
in
sure.
fact, it seemed quite the opposite, that they become a better introverted intuitive. And so I'm wondering, is it rewarding, like that school example? Is that in some way the universe saying, no, your template is not to serve the school process. Your template is to serve a different process.
I think you'll see as I go on how I describe how I see type now, actually, as a developmental process.
Okay.
What I think about the research from before was that, like any statistics, it averages things out. What that research actually told me was that, as a whole, the human race is not doing too well in developing its potential. But yeah, obviously there was examples of individuals where we certainly see that development process going much far beyond the average, or even far less beyond it, much behind it, and that's the people that Jung would have met in the mental institute, right? So what would you do with an exercise? Rather than me talking about 2 types of attention, it's like, oh, abstract theory. Let's experience it. You have a mind, you're human. Let's do it, okay? I'm going to ask you to do some mindfulness as an exercise, and it's totally optional. If you're not comfortable with doing it, that's fine. Just to sit and observe what people are doing. It's really, mindfulness, far from being an abstract religious practice, it's very much an attention exercise where we can experience directly these concepts I was talking about. So I'd like to just find a comfortable position to sit. I'm just going to use my lilting English accent, just to talk you very calmly through a process. And that means just finding a comfortable sitting position, perhaps with your hands on your knees, if that's comfortable, however it's best for you. I'd just like you to center yourself and take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. Just get in touch with your body, feel your feet on the floor. Just notice it though. Don't have to do anything to change it. What we're going to do is just watch the breath. That means being aware of the sensation. You just feel the air coming in through your nostrils. What's that like? What's the temperature of it like? What does it feel like? Is it equal through both nostrils? How does your body expand when you breathe in? When you release the air, how does it come out? So you just focus. We're going to just use this deliberate attention to just be aware of the breath. We're being curious. We're going to just watch it, keep our focus on it. And over time, if our mind wanders, as it does, as it will, I just would like to notice where it goes. What's that experience like? What are you doing when your mind wanders off? And when you realize that it's wandered, just bring your attention back to your breath. That's all we're doing, is just kindly, gently bringing it back. So, whose mind wandered? Did anyone's not wander? Okay. Do you practice a lot of mindfulness at all?
Not in the manner we're talking about it, but I would submit that the INTP default is really just empty all the time.
Okay, interesting. Yes, all the time. It's very zen.
Yeah, a little bit.
So, I think a lot of, hopefully, Jeff, you've got anything to add?
I just wanted to say, this reminds me of something we do in keto. It's at the beginning called mocha soup. It's to relax the body and to shut out all the outside and be where we are. In the moment, being mindful.
Now the idea of what we were doing is to use the present moment, actually our extroverted sensing, if you think about it, watching the physical sensation of the breath, as an anchor point. It's just an anchor point so that we have a reference. And the reason we use the breath is because if you're alive and you can hear me talking right now, I know you're breathing. It's always there. We could choose other stimuli, but we don't necessarily know it's going to be there. But we know that one is, and therefore we use it. It's just an arbitrary anchor, but it's a useful one. And it's the anchor so that you can use your, as we said it before, this orienting bottom-up attention. That's what's the wandering mind. That's what's actually carrying you off when you let go of the. You can only hold on so long for this other type of attention. It's the executive top-down attention, which is doing the deliberate paying attention. As in the talk before, you could also say that this is like system 1 of the mind, and this is like system 2 of the mind. If you read like Daniel Kahneman. Different kinds of attention. And when we let go, when we take our eye off the ball, so to speak, it just goes rolling off. Wherever the hill takes it. Depends on the slope. It goes somewhere else. Anyone go anywhere interesting when they're drifting off?
Well, sometimes I had
effect where things that were going on around, like when you would say shepherd, for example, like I had an image in my head of this shepherd that one of my kids' books has, or like the talk next door, she got a little louder.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, my mind would kind of should have shape and dance around a little bit based on.
So you're remembering a
what's going on
specific
outside.
image of a shepherd that you have seen before.
Yeah.
So you're probably going the introvert sensing, I would suggest. What's your type?
ENTP.
ENTP. So you're going to be an extrovert intuitive. So that's interesting. So you're going to be potentially, you're dreaming, or your inferior function for you, sort of taking you off into another place, your anima. And do any thoughts?
I think I may have balanced my inferior, I kept bouncing forward in time
Right.
to anticipating how I'm going to react during my brain scanning session with Dargan Hardy.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
So
So
I
you're
kept
you're
jumping
dreaming the
between-
future, you're envisaging.
Yeah, between the present, where I was looking at the sparkles on my pen or whatever it was, and that sort of thing.
There's all number of places we could go to, and this is the thing, that subjective experience is such a deep place. But we're always drifting around. That's the whole point, all the day long through our lives. And unless we've got an anchor to notice that we've drifted away from, we don't even know it's happening. Right? So let's talk about self. John Beebe, he's very strong on this these days. This is a quote from his book. Typology has therefore turned out to be not his ego psychology, as so many of us assumed, but his self-psychology. And when he talks about self, he's talking about the little s self. Because in Jungian terminology, he needs to differentiate this as something specific. It's not something that all Jungians share. This is partly John's formulation here. The little s self. I've sort of defined that, and I've interpreted it as the mediating centre of the unconscious, the autonomous, self-orienting, non-reflexive, immersive, wandering mind. I think those words sum it up. I sort of came up with that as a sentence too. And really that's the home of the bottom-up wandering attention that you were just experiencing when your mind drifted up. The thing that you're actually experiencing most of the day, every day, but what you aren't even realising. What he's saying is that the core of type, this framework of functions and archetypes, is situated in this, the little s self, the unconscious, or spontaneous, emerging, self-orientated, non-reflexive, being it's not self-aware, it's not self-referential. It's a sort of consciousness, when you're in it, you are it. Does that make sense? It's raw experience of consciousness happening. You are the consciousness in that moment. And that's why you don't always notice that it's happening, because it's not reflective. The only reason you noticed it just before in the example, in the exercise, is because I was trying to get you to pay attention to your ego mind, your mediating centre of conscious, reflexive, willful, deliberate, executive mind. Does that make sense? That's why, because only the ego has this sense of being reflexive, being aware that it's aware, has that objective. It can be third-person perspective on yourself. It's the only way we can be self-aware, actually, is through using the ego, because when we're not using the ego, we're in the little self, and that is just being, it's happening. We don't have an eye of science within that. So does that make sense? So what I'm saying is that we're living out of this unconscious self, essentially, and the ego is there as the other secondary system. The big S self, in Jungian terminology, we have to sort of make a difference here between that and what John's talking about, because the self, from Jung's perspective, he often talks about this kind of master archetypal blueprint for the entire emerging process of the mind or psyche. Sort of the entire evolved master plan for the mind is this self-archetype in its schematic form. And it's also the driving force of development and individuation. Why does your mind develop? Why does it grow? Why does it change? Because that's part of what the self is. It's this process of growth and emergence. It's built into it. and all the other archetypes are contained within it. They all come from it. You know, this way in sort of therapy work, you know, people sort of use artwork as a medium, and often, you know, the self is depicted as a mandala, this sort of whole from which all, you know, the rest of the psyche all relates to. So it's just to really be quite clear that, you know, when you've got two words that are the same word, you've got to be really clear about your definitions, right? So let's look at like other ideas of self. You know, philosophers have been talking about self for a long, long time. It goes back longer than this, but you know, in recent models, you can sort of bring it back to this era of sort of the 16th, 17th century. The main sort of mindsets come in present day thinking come from people like Descartes, who's talking about this sense. He sort of gave birth to this sort of philosophy of dualism, where you've got this sort of separate self within the self, which is often depicted as this kind of little person, which is the observer, which is sometimes called the homunculus, like the little person within that is this. You know, we all know what it's like to experience that, though. We sort of feel that there's a central self thing inside ourselves, which is somehow separate to the world around us. Get that sense? Some people nodding, some people no, I'm just one with the universe. I am not that. And it probably actually for an ESFJ, there probably is a real sense of actual connectedness, I would imagine, to everything, which is probably why you don't get the sense of separation, which I think would probably be more, for me, certainly like the opposite of that, introverted thinking. I'm going to come back to you in a second. Because you're the ego book writing authory expert. Sorry, do you want to?
No, it's just when I did some training in psychosynthesis, we used to do this exercise where you just had to meditate on, I have a body but I'm not my body, I have thoughts but I'm not my thoughts, and the third one, and it just used to mess with your head a bit. But the idea was to try and find that little person in there.
Yeah, find the homunculus.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd suggest perhaps, you know, the ego's part of the mind perhaps is more like that. You know, it's got a sense of, because have a third person perspective, you kind of need a boundary. You need to be separate. Otherwise, how can you be third person, right? How can you be reflexive if there's no separateness? Because if you're immersed and you're in it, you have no standpoint to see it from. So
I have one of my coaching clients is an INTJ, and he's very good at this, but when he's really not doing well, he's so good at it that it's destroying his life. I mean, he's so detached that he gets comments from other people. You know, have you tried mindfulness? You know, they want to reattach him, and he complains about it to every medical professional he meets.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to you know, all these things are fascinating to go into. You know, I'd love to meet this person and talk to him. You know, other philosophers like David Hume, who around similar just after that. You know, he's got a different thread of philosophy, which is the materialist school, and you know, it's saying, well, this little person in the head doesn't exist. You know, it's really an illusion created from a bundle of sensations. There really is only the ongoing experience, and that's a bit more like the little less self that we were talking about. You see what I mean? So there's these two these competing perspectives on reality that we have. And I think it comes down to these different systems that the Jungians talk about. It comes down to these different types of attention that we learn about in cognitive science. In more recent times, Jean-Paul Sartre, never thought I'd be quoting Jean-Paul Sartre, but here is, you know, he's like transcending the ego. He's writing about saying that hypothetical ego is a constructed reflection of spontaneous consciousness. If you think of spontaneous consciousness as this little less self, this emerging, wandering mind, you're saying that the ego is kind of like people talk about this, like a narrative thread that's drawn from that, but is in itself not a real thing. Not philosophy as such, but psychoanalysts like Heinz Kohut have written a lot about self. But it's interesting that his definition of self sounds more like Jung's definition of ego, which is where this whole thing is baffling and confusing. People use the same words mean different things, there's different definitions. So like if you start reading about self and ego and stuff, like you're in a minefield. So just be aware, when I'm using these terms, I'm defining them as I define them. You could find like 10 different definitions that say different things. But I'm trying to draw a similar thread between these things. The next area I want to look at is multiplicity. Multiplicity of self or consciousness or personality. Let's think about this. We deal with personality, right? Some people, others who work in psychology and OD work with traits as well, that sort of way of looking at personality, which is kind of the mainstream way of looking at personality. But all textbooks on personality generally imply that there's a single unified self or personality. We have a personality, and we're measuring traits of it, or different aspects of it. Does that make sense? It's almost implies that we have one personality. But there's lots, when we start digging into this, there's an awful lot of stuff out there. It's just not in the mainstream, about multiplicity, or as it's called, sub-personalities. When we start looking at sub-personalities, and how actually, when we're just one personality, we've got an array of sub-personalities which are different. And those of you who are astute will start to recognise where this joins up with John Beebe's model. John Rowan, he's a British transpersonal psychologist. And he's now in his 90s. He's still going. He's an amazing guy. I was lucky enough to meet him a couple of years ago. He wrote a book. He wrote the book on subpersonalities, called Subpersonalities. And it's in the 1990s, quite a while ago now, but he defines a subpersonality as a semi-permanent and semi-autonomous region of the personality capable of acting as a person. So in that sense, we've got these different parts of personality rather than thinking about a whole single unified personality.
Would that include something like, if someone did an active imagination exercise and an actual manifestation of some individual guided them, through some problem they're having? Is that the same sort of thing we're talking about here?
So in transpersonal psychology, like practices like Gestalt or psychosynthesis, things like that, will take people on these experiential journeys, and they'll take people on these experiential journeys to literally meet parts of their personality. Jung did it, and that's his Red Book experience. It's a journey in active imagination, which is another way that people can explore these sort of parts of themselves. So yeah, very much so. You can do it experientially like that, and that's how a lot of the early sort of studies are done in this area. We all know it though from our everyday experience, or at least I hope we do. Part of me thinks this, but part of me thinks that. On one hand I'm like this, on the other hand I'm like that. We know that these sort of, at this time, when I'm with these people, I'm very much like this. And actually, when I go home and visit my parents, I'm just a completely different person. I'm like back when I was like I'm that other person that I was like when I was back when I was a kid. We start to qualitatively recognise these different parts of the personality. And there's literally 50 different authors and schools of thought that have written about multiplicity, subpersonalities, and they all use different words. Here's just a few, like ego states. Anyone know about transactional analysis? Yeah, so in that sense, these subpersonality parts are recognised and called as ego states, they're called. Internal objects, that's more like a psychoanalytic way of looking at it. Self-schemas is another way you could call it, like having these categorical different parts of the personality. Beebe is even explicit about it in his book, if you actually start to read it carefully. This is a direct quote from his book last year. I like to speak of archetypal complexes as typical subpersonalities found in all of us. He even says it directly. He says Jung made the idea of multiplicity of souls a cornerstone of this analytical psychology. Feeling tones complexes, each functioning as a splinter psyche. We've also got to be careful here because in modern day life we recognise multiple personality disorder, right? We say, God, I'm not bored, that makes me mentally ill or something. We've all got this kind of weird stigmatic kind of weird attitude towards these things. But the general sense is that that is only something pathological. And Rowan and others would say, well, it's just a spectrum. It's just a spectrum. When we're at the extreme end of the spectrum, you do get parts that are completely disconnected, and there's no connection between them at all. And that's when things like what was called multiple personality disorder is now being reclassified. But that's where that sort of thing comes from. It's an extreme on the spectrum, but it's a dissociative spectrum, whereby the self, the mind, it's dissociated into various different parts. And that's a normal thing in average, typical, normal, healthy human beings, that there is a level of dissociation of the personality of the self that we experience as sub-personalities, or ego states, or whatever you call them.
I imagine a common example of that could be as simple as when a physician puts on, their blood coat, or when a military person puts on a uniform, it kind of triggers, it can trigger another collection of behaviors. Not one this
perhaps,
like
exactly. There's lots of different ways that these things comes out. So I want to do this very quickly. I'm aware of time, in relatively time. I've got till 1:45.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So just quickly, I'd like you to think about your type's dominant function. So you all should hopefully know that fairly well. I want you to think in first person here. So I want to think in your subjective experience. What's it like when this heroic sub-personality is the focus of consciousness for your little s self? So when your dominant function comes out to the front in your daily life, and your attention is drawn to it by the wandering mind, what is your subjective experience like? When I say subjective, I mean, for instance, I'm introverted, intuitive in my dominant. People would say from a third-person perspective, Richard's off in his own little world. He's disconnected. We don't even know where he's gone. He's got a really weird blank look on his face. And then he comes out with these wacky, crazy ideas, these prophecies about the universe. Like, what's going on? So,
my dominant is introverted thinking.
okay.
And I've known my shadow types, men who are lawyers for 40 years, and I've known other introverted types.
Yeah.
One comment I can make relates to this extroverted thinking, that's from extroverted dominant type. The thinking is more extrospective, if you will, out there, but it's also more disciplined in a way that introverted thinking is more intellectually rambunctious.
So what's it feel like for you, though? When you are off in your introverted thinking, what is it like?
Well, I can't do it with a few sound bites. I mean, that's the problem of being an INTP. I can't just throw out a couple of sound bites and say that's it, but I can say a bit about it. It is less disciplined, but just as intellectually powerful. And I'm saying it's less disciplined, from my experience, than extroverted thinking. There seems to be kind of an order of discipline. That's why an extroverted thinking type of entity makes a good courtroom lawyer. Because his thinking is, I would not, but I'd make a damn good expert witness, and I have had expert witnesses, because of that rambunctiousness and that freedom that introverted thinking has. It's less bounded. I think extroverted thinking, to me, seems more bounded by the rules, whereas with introverted thinking, some of the rules are just so much pettiness, and to hell with the rules. And it's intellectually just as powerful.
I'm in a dangerous place.
That makes any sense.
I'm in a dangerous place talking to an introverted intuitive and it's introverted thinking type and getting more deeper into introverted thinking. Because introverted thinking, it keeps going and going, and analyzes, doesn't it? By definition.
I experience it very, very similar.
Okay, yeah, well, we talked about that before. Yeah, that's right. It is less disciplined, but it's intellectually as powerful and as explorative and inquiring and penetrating and incisive.
Yeah.
All of that. But it's very different from extroverted thinking. I'm not making a value judgment, it's just an observation.
And it's interesting, I think, what the subjective experience of that is like. We sort of still describe it in quite an abstract way, but it's like, what does it feel like? What do you see?
Subjective quality about it.
Yeah. For me, for introverted intuition, it's like I literally, when my attention gets drawn probably to somewhere around here, and then here, and then it gets this kind of buzzing feeling, and then something pops out, and it feels exciting. I get this, I go, oh, that's amazing. And it feels really profound. I get this amazing sense of that there's something there, and then I desperately have to cling on to it. I have to go, no, it's going to get away. What is this thing? And then I have to start analysing it with my other functions and actually go trying to work out what it was.
Do you have a sense? I have a struggle with it where I try to categorize it as a visual sense for how something looks. When sometimes it's a collection of a really vague, like it's the color green plus this pattern plus this time of year plus this place that I was when I was 3 years old, or it's a collection of things that I can't draw on paper, even if I had all the art tools in the world and a video recording. Yeah, that's my subjective sense.
I love it. See, when extroverted intuitives talk about their subjective experience, it's always surprises me just how amazingly vivid and like, wow, it's almost like surreal. You know, my partner Laura is a ENFP, and she talks about like almost like, if you've seen the film Minority Report, where Tom Cruise has got the screen there, which is like sort of a projected display in front of him, where he sort of does this and sort of moves things around. And she says it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my God!
I don't know if anybody's gone to Dario's thing or if they're as fond of him as I am, but I totally dig Dario. And when we've hung out and had a chance to chat about how introverted intuition works so prophetically and accurately when it does, he describes it as getting out of the way of, this is just how he describes it. I'm probably not going to do it justice, but he says he has a couple waypoints, and it really is just like, you know, 1/3 or 1/3, 2/3 ending. So he doesn't get caught up in how he's supposed to get to the end. He knows where the end is supposed to be, and then he gets out of the way. And if any of you listen to Dario talk, it's just this genius stuff comes out, and you're like, where on earth did that come from? And he'll say, I don't know.
Introverted intuition can run amok. It's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the balance between genius and
I'm a
madness.
very dangerous guy, I have to say. The world's got to watch out.
Sometimes you're genius, sometimes you're
Well, yeah, I could melt people's brains with a single concept. I'm going to quickly move on, because I know I'm going to go through this talk, and there's not a lot left. This is infinite depth. We haven't even scratched the surface with this stuff in time. Think about it. We've been so stuck kind of in a behavioural perspective. Like this kind of person behaves a bit like that, and they do this and they do that. It's like third person. What's it like for you? Talking to the extroverted intuitives, my God, you get surprised when you talk to people and you find out what's really going on inside.
Rich, he's actually INTJ.
It's INTJ?
Yeah, so
Really?
that's
So I thought you said
two
ENTP.
aspects of
You don't say ENTP?
We can rewind if you want, but I'm an INTJ, yeah.
Never mind, sorry.
No, we have a
I noticed when you
here,
said
though.
extroverted intuition, but
Did I say extroverted
No, he
intuition?
did.
No, he did. He was defining your
You're
experience
talking about ENTPs
and I as
before. I don't know why, but I got ENTP. I don't know where I had that from.
Oh yeah, that could be.
So your experience of NI isn't as visual or as
No, it's kind of invisible.
Come here, let me touch your forehead for a second.
yeah.
But again, it could be very different for different people, which is again really interesting.
Well, and I don't get that all the time either.
Both of you said actually.
Yeah.
That I get the thing that you get,
Right.
but then it's almost like it forms a picture, but it's an intangible picture, and I found myself trying to picture. But it's not here like the Minority Report screen. It's here, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
he's just crystallised.
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes I will actually see like a sort of image. It's like what Jung calls a symbol. You know, something that sort of metaphorically represents what it is.
Yeah, that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, I've got to try to be careful to separate that from my extroverted intuition, which is more daydreamy and thinks of like disaster scenarios and things like that. But yeah, it's quite a, anyway, let's move on, because the internal world is another minefield waiting to explore. I want to talk to you about the personality parts, because like what I'm trying to do here, based on all that stuff that I've been reading about and all the ways that I'm looking at this, what I'm trying to do is change the paradigm. I'm creating this model of personality parts, which, like I said, I'm going to take on and create as a system that I can, talk to people who maybe never explored themselves, never know anything about psychology or personality, and give them a model that gives them a reference for the experiences of their mind, like those forms of attention, like the forms of consciousness that we've been talking about, that gives them a structure for understanding that as the basis, but then it gives them a model for the structure of the mind. And it's based on multiplicity and the reality that we experience every day of having different parts of ourselves. With John's model as a sort of backbone for this, but just turning it upside down and then positioning type within it. So whereas John's seen his model as an extension of type, which adds on theories about the mind and self and so on to type, I'm saying let's start with the models of the self and the mind and then position type within it. Give type a context, so then actually the rest of the world of psychology can see where it is and where it's relevant. Because otherwise it's just some other avenue, dead-end avenue that they're trying to cut off.
I wish more people would use that word.
Which word?
Context.
Context, yeah. Trying to give type of context. This is a bit like my early versions of what I can use as a working model of personality parts. Showing, uses the typical sort of colour patterns that people see in type models, and understanding the dynamics between the parts of people, and seeing that in a visual way. This is something I work with people when I'm coaching and so on. Trying to give people a sense of these distinct aspects of themselves.
Is this similar to what Dario's trying to do?
Don't know. From what I've read of him, I'm not sure.
I'm just saying because I'm visualizing the drawing of the brain that he uses, that's showing what patterns light up where, and I'm just wondering if that...
This isn't relational.
No.
It's not.
It's sequential.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to get into brain stuff, for sure.
But you're going to love it.
It's going to be thick. Integration. So this is we're talking about this process of the mind developing. Actually, like Dan Siegel talks about the process being called integration, and within his definition of integration, he says it's got two processes, two parts. Differentiation, the branching, subdivision, the expansion, finding out more nuanced forms of the functions of the processes, and then what he calls linkage, which is the joining of parts into a more unified whole. So it's a weird process that we're going through with our minds, that we start off with a whole, we unpack it and spread it out into a diversity of parts, and then we link it up again into another whole. And it's like kind of a weird thing that we do as human beings.
Can you blow up? Is there any way to blow up what's in the middle right?
It's just some dots with loads of links between them. Just imagine that you have a bunch of dots and you
The left column's input, the middle's hidden, and the
that's just a
outside-
random picture I found on Google Images, which is
Okay.
why I've not actually, I'm just giving this to get the sense of when you've got different parts of a system, you can make all the connections between them are possible.
Okay.
Yeah. So with the mind process, we've got this differentiation, we've got the linkage, the connection, the two parts of the integration process. So again, this is part of using in my model. So it starts to look like this when you're talking about the mind from this sort of perspective. What I'm sort of proposing is, and transpersonal psychologists talk about this, the pre-personal mind, the mind that the baby has when it's kind of a whole, but before it's been unpacked. Okay, and it's different to the transpersonal mind, which is a whole after it's been unpacked and relinked. But you've got this sense of this is where we start, and then we've got two sides to this. We've got the functional side, we've got the form side, as I'm calling it, which is the archetypes, the what we do, the way that we do it. Each of these sides of the mind is going to differentiate into 8. We've got 8 function attitudes. We've got 8 archetypes. Yeah. So this
There's that
is
number 8 again.
8
that you and I were talking about
times
last
8
night.
equals 64 potential parts. And I did put on a thing. I'm going to talk about ancient Chinese philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, Richard,
Yeah.
tell me about
Say
that.
it. We practice
I've got
it.
time, sorry, I'm out of time.
Say it.
Yeah, you have time.
Listen, I did a talk for this. John Beebe came to my talk at the when he came to see us in London in October last year. I did a talk prepared for the London I Ching Society, which I now actually run as well. I run the meetup. And John's actually quite excited about this, but it's too early days for me to publish this stuff yet. But me connecting the I Ching and ancient Chinese philosophy to this model, just wait, okay? All right, you heard it here first. So, but what the outcome of this is, if you've got, let's say that you've got the hero archetype there, can imagine, in terms of linkage, you've got all of the possibilities, every possible linkage to every possible function. In terms of our shared inherited mind architecture, we've all got these 64 potentials. How awesome is that? We're all from the same thing, we're on the same archetype.
So you're saying the whole potential is 64, and then each
64.
one of us expresses 8.
Well, this is where I'm going with that. What do we or not? I mean, we think we express 8 functions, but like when you add in the archetype, you've got 64 potentials. Like you've got a lot of statistics to do. If you want to explore that, and think about it. That's a lot of work.
So with that, are you saying that NI could be a trickster to an INTJ?
What I'm saying is the potential is there, surely, in all of us. First, and actually, if you think about what the ego's development is, it's the hero's journey. It's the hero trying to become linked to all of the functionalities.
So then you're saying every archetype could be linked to every one of them.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that obviously we can't do it all at once.
Right.
So what happens with our type is one hero and one good parent link up first. They develop first.
And it's more likely for some develop versus others relative to 64 potential.
Yeah, but this is the question of where does our type come from, though? Is it actually innately programmed into us from conception, or is it epigenetic? Is it something that is emerging from our genes with the environment? We don't know because we can't ask children what their preferences are until they're old enough to speak, so therefore it's impossible to ever know.
I don't know, my ISFJ could fold a blanket before he could speak, so.
Really?
I'm mostly joking.
Okay. But what I'm saying is, we've got this development path whereby I'm assuming that we develop this one hero, one good parent, and then as a result, a bit like music, we develop the rest sort of fall into line with that. In a way, is anyone a musician or have studied music at all? Does everyone understand the concept that we have like 7 different notes? Right.
Circle fifths.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the concept. But we have these 7 different notes, and then in their own right, they're just notes. But when you give them a context, I was a bass player. When you play a big bass note underneath it, you give it a context. You give it a key center, and then all of the notes have a context. They have a relevant place, and when you listen to the notes played against the key center, they become an interval. They have a quality. They have a certain sound, and we use those intervals in chords to give emotional power and emotional expression, right? But it's the same within this. Once you've got the hero and the good parent there, it's like the key center, and the other ones have a relative quality to them. In the same way that once you've got a key center in music, all the other notes have a relative quality to them. It doesn't matter what note you choose. If you make that the key center, then the note that is in the relative place to it will have say fifth. It'll have the quality of a fifth, and a fifth sounds like a really nice, harmonious one, or it'll sound like a flat fifth, a not so nice, pleasant sound. And there's this sense of the archetypes are a bit like that. Some of them are more harmonious and consonant, some of them are more dissonant. Theory alert. Sorry. Anyway, so what I'm saying is I'm seeing the 16 MBTI types as developmental pathways. That's where I'm putting them right now, right in this model as developmental pathways within a wider model of mind and integration. I'm saying we've all got the same set of potentials. We all come from the same place. And the hypothetical start and end points of development are the same for all of us. If you think about it, if we were a single-celled organism of mind, like a little amoeba, we start off there, that's our starting point, that's the center. And what's the hypothetical end point? It's been godlike, essentially. If you look at what, like for me, the projection of what religion is trying to tell us is showing us is our infinite potential, really, in terms of development. And when you come to, say these 2 hypothetical end points, but we all kind of start off there as nothing in development. No one's ever going to get to become truly godlike unless we learn to live for several thousand years and we extend our lifespan. But the potential's there. But the point is, we all take different overall routes, and that's for me what the type is. Yeah.
There's a word in family therapy that you might be interested in, is equifinality.
Equifinality, yeah.
The pronounced is the same.
That's interesting. Yeah. So interesting, family therapy, family systems, things like that. I'm starting to look into all this sort of thing. There's a thing called internal family systems, and you come across that quite big in the States now. I found a therapist in London that I'm going to go and see to sort of get learning that model. So the idea, the beauty of this personality parts model is that you can start working with all of these therapeutic and development systems that have already existed through lots of other types. But when you add in the power of Beebe's model and actually the map of the parts, it's just is going crazy. Yeah.
Richard, I'd just like to point out, you said up there you had the most revealing thing that I've seen up there is your 16 MBTI types of developmental pathways.
Yeah.
And I think the key word, of course, is pathway.
Yeah.
Developmental doing that. I think that's quite innovative for the type community. From what I've been reviewing of first generation Jungian analysts, they would say that psychological type, in a sense, is a pathway or our pathway. So it's somewhat profound.
It's an individuation pathway, yeah. I mean, it's like, so finally, I know we're a bit over time, but the summary is we can use depth typology and the theories also from a wider context, the things I've talked about like mind, consciousness, self, multiplicity, to create a new introductory model of the mind. It doesn't start with type, it starts with mind, it starts with consciousness, but then places type within that in a context. So rather than type being the focus, it becomes a developmental pathway. So I just wanted to share this. This is my mental splurge for the year. This is where I'm at right now. If you want to talk about this, I'm here at the conference. Let's have a drink. Let's theorise about stuff. Let's share ideas. I'm hopefully going to do some workshops online as well. So if anyone wants to do one of the, an exploratory journey through the parts of themselves using this model, Jim Beebe's model, let me know. I'd love to help you to discover it. If you can't talk to me this week, just email me, richard@whoamireally.com. I've also got personalityparts.com, but that's not fully sorted out yet. So, thank you very much.